I never thought moving into what was supposed to be our dream neighborhood would turn into a nightmare that would push me to my limits as a parent, as a neighbor, and as someone who just wanted to live in peace with my family. My wife and I had worked for years to afford a home in a quiet, well-maintained community, the kind of place where kids could ride their bikes safely, where lawns were trimmed neatly, and where you'd think people looked out for one another. Our son, who was born with a disability that affects both his mobility and his sensory processing, had always been our priority, and when we chose this place, it was because we wanted him to have stability, comfort, and safety. But then came the HOA, or more specifically, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman everyone in the neighborhood referred to as Karen. And trust me, she lived up to every stereotype you've ever heard. From the very beginning, she made it clear that she considered my family a nuisance. She didn't like that our son sometimes made noises while playing in the yard. She didn't like that his wheelchair left tracks on the grass when he went across the lawn. She didn't like the ramp we had installed at our front door, even though it was legally required and fully within code. She called it an eyesore. At first, I tried to ignore her comments, dismissing them as the complaints of a bitter woman with too much time on her hands, but it quickly became obvious that she was targeting us in ways that were calculated and cruel. The HOA began sending us letters almost weekly, nitpicking about the color of our shutters, about how often we watered our lawn, about how long our garbage cans stayed out on collection day. Meanwhile, other neighbors were doing the exact same things without a single letter. It was crystal clear. Karen had set her sights on us, and she was using her position to harass my family. What broke me wasn't the letters, though. It was the day I caught her standing at the edge of our yard, watching my son as he tried to wheel himself up the driveway. She wasn't just watching. She was glaring, lips curled into this tight sneer, and when she noticed me looking, she said, "People like him don't belong in neighborhoods like this. Maybe you should consider a facility more suited for his needs." The venom in her voice sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to scream at her to throw her off my property, but I held back because my son was right there, and the last thing I wanted was for him to hear those words and internalize them. Instead, I comforted him, got him inside, and spent the rest of that night pacing, seething with anger I didn't know what to do with. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, everything escalated to a level I never thought possible. It was a warm afternoon, and my son was in the driveway, playing with a small ball while I worked in the garage. I stepped inside the house for just a few minutes to grab some water. When I came back out, I couldn't see him. At first, I thought maybe he had rolled to the side yard, but the ball was lying abandoned on the ground. My heart sank. I called his name. Nothing. I started running around the house, calling louder, panic setting in, and then I heard it. A muffled banging sound, like fists pounding against something hollow. It was coming from the small storage shed at the corner of the HOA-maintained park, just a few yards down the street. My stomach turned cold as ice. I sprinted over, yanked the padlock, and when I threw the door open, there he was, my son, red-faced, tears streaming, terrified, trying to wheel himself backward away from the dark, cramped space. The sight nearly brought me to my knees. I pulled him out, held him close, and he kept sobbing, "She locked me in, Daddy. She locked me in." My hands were shaking with rage and disbelief. I didn't even need to ask who she was. Only one person in this neighborhood was cruel enough to do something like that. Karen. My mind raced, and I thought, how can I prove it? How can I make sure she pays for what she did? Because this wasn't just harassment anymore. This was abuse. This was a crime. What Karen didn't know was that just a week earlier, I had installed security cameras around the outside of our house, including one that had a perfect view of the sidewalk leading to that very shed. My intention had been to catch petty HOA harassment, maybe someone leaving notes or tampering with our ramp. I never expected it would capture something so vile. That night, after I had finally calmed my son down and gotten him to sleep, I pulled up the footage, and there it was, clear as day. Karen, walking briskly toward our driveway, fake smile plastered on her face, crouching down to speak to my son. At first, it looked like she was pretending to be friendly, but then she gestured toward the shed, coaxing him to follow her. He hesitated, but eventually rolled along. She opened the door, waved him inside, and the second his wheels crossed the threshold, she slammed it shut, yanked the lock in place, and walked away, dusting off her hands like she had just taken out the trash. I felt physically sick watching it. Every parent knows that primal instinct to protect their child at all costs, and here it was, caught on camera, someone trying to strip my son of his safety, his dignity, his humanity. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles cracked. I replayed the video again and again, each time feeling a surge of rage followed by a cold, steady determination. She thought she could terrorize my family. She thought she could get away with this. But she was wrong. The next morning, I made copies of the footage and called the police. I explained everything, handed them the video, and watched as their expressions shifted from polite detachment to outright disgust. One officer muttered, "Jesus, what's wrong with people?" They assured me that this was serious, that they would pursue charges, and I felt a flicker of relief. But I wasn't done. Because Karen's reign of terror over the neighborhood went beyond my family, and I wanted everyone to see her for what she truly was. That evening, I attended the HOA meeting, something I usually avoided because they were insufferable. Hours of Karen droning on about grass length and mailbox paint colors. This time, though, I walked in with a USB drive in my pocket and a storm in my chest. The room was full, neighbors chatting, Karen perched at the head of the table like a smug dictator, clipboard in hand. When the meeting began, she immediately started in on me. "We need to discuss the Henderson family's repeated violations." But I cut her off. My voice was steady, louder than I intended. "Actually, I think we need to discuss something else. Something much more serious." All eyes turned to me. Karen's smile wavered. I walked to the front, plugged the USB into the projector, and hit play. The room fell silent. Gasps erupted as they watched Karen lure my son into that shed, slam the door, and walk away. Someone actually shouted, "What the hell?" Karen's face went pale, then red, then pale again. She stammered, "This is taken out of context." But the murmurs around the room drowned her out. I let the video play twice, then turned to the room. "That's what your HOA president thinks of children with disabilities. That's what she thinks of my family. This isn't just harassment. This is abuse." The room exploded. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak before suddenly voiced their own grievances. Stories poured out about Karen fining elderly residents for minor infractions, about her screaming at kids for riding bikes on the sidewalk, about her threatening letters. People were furious, and for the first time, her iron grip was slipping. I stood there, watching her squirm, trying to defend herself, and it was the most satisfying thing I'd ever seen. The fallout was swift. The police pressed charges for unlawful restraint and child endangerment. The HOA board voted her out within a week, stripping her of any authority. Word spread through the neighborhood, and suddenly people who had once avoided me were stopping by to thank me, to apologize for not speaking up sooner, to offer help. The ramp, that she called an eyesore? Neighbors volunteered to decorate it with flowers and paint, turning it into something beautiful. My son went from being treated like a burden to being treated like a hero, the boy whose courage had exposed the monster in their midst. And Karen? She disappeared. One day, her house had a "for sale" sign, and not long after, she was gone. Rumor has it she moved to another state, probably to find some other community to torment, but I doubt she'll ever fully escape what happened. Because I made sure copies of that video went to the local news, and the story spread farther than she could have imagined. She wasn't just HOA Karen anymore. She was the woman who tried to lock a disabled child in a shed. Her name was forever tied to her cruelty. Looking back, I still feel the anger rise in my chest when I remember the panic in my son's voice, the tears on his cheeks, the betrayal of knowing someone could be that heartless. But I also feel something else. Pride. Pride that I stood up, that I fought back, that I didn't let her win. Revenge, in the end, wasn't just about humiliating her. It was about protecting my son, about showing him that no matter what obstacles he faces, no matter how cruel the world can be, there will always be justice. And when I look at him now, smiling as he wheels himself up the ramp we built together, I know we came out stronger. Karen tried to break us. Instead, she made us unshakable.